Hey, Brittany.
Hi, Karen.
Welcome back. Welcome back.
Yes, the E word. How
The
you
E
feeling?
word. I'm okay. It's been a good day, and I'm hoping we hop into the weekend with some relaxation,
Love
read a
that.
good book,
Sounds
watch some
great.
TV shows, chill out.
Perfect.
How about you?
I'm gonna do the same. I'm gonna do the same. There's a book that I am really excited to get into. So yeah. So
Okay. Maybe what we'll do one day is have little bonus sessions
yes,
just on a book review.
book review. Can we add some shows in there?
Let's add some shows in there too.
Yeah.
Mix
Yeah.
it up.
Because I have to say, I am, we both love comics. And so I have been watching Agatha all along. And we speak about equity and we can make it work. We can make
We
it
can
work.
make it work or not because people are very serious all the time about the very serious topic, so people can see some of the unserious stuff as well,
Exactly. We're
right?
very serious about our joy as well.
There you go. You
So
have to balance that with these hard topics.
we do.
So
We
we
do.
definitely do. But we have a hard topic again today, right?
I think so. I
Okay.
think so. So we are at the time, it's election season, right?
Yep.
And we are dealing with these debates.
Hmm.
Now, as I understand it, the debates are the candidates' opportunities to detail their plans, their prospective policies, and their vision for the country. And not only do we have the presidential debates, we have the vice presidential debates. And so this past week, I watched the vice presidential debates. Did you?
I did.
Initial takeaways?
Well, on an unserious front, okay, it was far less entertaining than the presidential debate, I'll have to say.
It's true.
Um,
No cats or dogs.
No cats or dogs.
Should have
Although
been.
that was terrible, not really entertainment, but in general, right? Um, but I guess in terms of content, like how you just describe what the debates are for, I honestly think the format is very difficult for that. It's the format is really made for sound bites or short, high level overviews of policy, not necessarily these deep dives that when you listen to, the reporters and pundits afterwards, like they're really gunning for or trying to extrapolate from the conversation. But when you're given 2 minutes on a topic like, immigration, how deep dive can you go? What it does lend itself to, again, is those high level takeaways, but also, um, people can misconstrue the information. Some people can out and out lie about the information. And because it's in these digestible bites, it's actually hard to fact check them in the moment, right? And if you are a very well spoken person, some things can actually seem to make sense. But when you have to, take a moment to digest and think about it, then
Yeah.
you realize that there's a lot more to it, or the facts may have been wrong in some cases. So it's a tricky format for me.
Interesting. Interesting. And I know that you talked about these kind of sound bites, which I think are fascinating because if you do them really well, you can be perceived to be much more competent,
Hmm.
right? And capable in your role. So when I'm thinking back, one of the sound bites I recall is, we were told there would be no fact checking.
Hmm.
And I found that to be interesting. But I guess my initial impression was that we had someone that was a very polished, very experienced debater.
Yeah.
We had someone who clearly went to law school.
He went to Yale.
He went to Yale. And someone who did not.
Right.
and really struggled with that format to create these snackable quips for us to take away and put in our pocket as proof positive of truthfulness or ability or competence or anything like that.
I agree with that. I mean, that's what's really tough, right? Because also you had that the one person who has been on the media trail for a more extended period of time, has, like you said, that background in training. And I think one of the reporters used this as kind of like a chameleon, right? In their ability
Mhm.
to, just navigate any sort of objection or contrary point of view with more stealth than the other candidate, right?
Mm.
And so, I've always kind of believed this to be true, that if you are an eloquent speaker and writer, it doesn't matter if you're wrong or you don't know what you're talking about. You will actually elevate faster than someone who doesn't have those skills or the same level of skills. Right? I think someone, I forget who said this because I would credit her right now, but she said, you could be dumb as a box of rocks if you can speak and write to some
Mm.
depth. Right? And it's true.
Yeah.
Okay? I'm not saying now that's if you're dumb. But if you're smart and can do those things, and now you add some level of, I'm just going to say, deceit into that mix, that can be mixed. That can be missed by many people because of your eloquence. If you speak with confidence and eloquence, people tend to believe you, no matter what you're saying, even if it's foolishness. Right? And so the Republican vice presidential candidate had far more superior skills in terms of his eloquence than the Democrat VP
Right.
candidate.
Right. And to your point about deceit, I think what we're tasked with doing, right, as voters is really kind of leaning into our existing biases to match the candidate up against who we believe is more capable, competent, maybe even trustworthy. And I've just been thinking about how and whether you're able to build trust in such a short period of time.
Mm,
Because to your point, I would say the vice presidential Republican candidate performed quite well during the debate, but has struggled with more long form media engagements because there seems to be, once the veneer kind of wears off, we're hearing things that seem to be a little bit strange, but certainly inauthentic. Whether it's admitting to having rented a dog
mm,
because it makes them seem more likable or
right,
approachable, to ordering a donut,
right,
to yeah, things that, or childcare. Right, there's a ton of talk about women's reproductive rights, or uh, people who birth children and caretaking abilities. And we see that there seems to be almost a preoccupation with women's roles in society, depending on their age, their reproductive ability, and their overall worth.
I agree with you. I think also the big piece there is about authenticity, right? And that's what we as voters need to be looking for, because a debate stage is a performance at the end of the day. It is not really meant for dialogue, right? Back and forth dialogue in a meaningful way. The structure itself doesn't allow for that, right? Mics have to be muted. You're not, and in debate, you shouldn't talk over people. But that's not how like real conversation is. And what we need to focus on is their quote unquote performance off the stage, because that is closer to who they are as a
Mhm.
person and how they plan to govern, right?
Mhm.
The other factor in these more modern elections is social media. So you actually are playing to the soundbite rather than wanting to have a meaningful conversation or dive deeper into those details, because it's not going to play well when it has to be replayed on social, which is problematic. And I think one of the things that irritates me the most about these debate forums is that the questions are never
Yes.
answered. So I'm like, why are we even asking questions? Just throw out topics. What do you
Right.
think about immigration? Boom. Let them riff, right?
Right.
And then do some back and forth rather than these very specific questions that they're not going to answer.
Mhm.
And worse, not going to be compelled to answer, which means the question didn't mean anything in the first place.
And that's it. So, yes, authenticity. Yes, to playing to a sound bite that you can chop up and use for the purposes of social media. And then my question is, is this how do we balance this? Right? How do we whet the appetite for substance analysis and critical thought? Or do we reshape our approach to substance analysis and critical thought to see what we can get into a 90-second clip?
It's a good
Uh,
point.
and what do we do with that? What do we? How can we engage with that? Because I would say with the Democratic vice presidential candidate, there were some flubs there. And
Hmm.
this is someone who said, initially that they've not historically been a great debater,
Hmm.
but had some wins on his own, right? I don't want to seem biased in that space and trying to answer for his timeline in China. It was awkward. It
It
went on
was.
too long and painful. And additionally, came back with a very, to your point about not answering questions, came back to say, hey, who do you believe won the 2020 election,
Right.
presidential election? Right? And said, that is a damning non answer.
Right. That was his snackable moment.
That was his snappable moment. And so for me, as a voter, when I'm listening, but even in my work, right, when I'm asking questions, I'm listening for the damnable non answer, right?
Hmm.
And the actual answer, right? Are you truly being responsive, or are you coming from a space of defensiveness? Are you looking to advance your own idea? And how do we get to a point where our communication is effective enough such that we're not solely bound by the limits of the other person's comprehension
Right.
or their willingness to comprehend?
Yeah, I think it's incredibly challenging because the voting populace and how people learn and
Mhm.
digest information is very different. And it's changed so dramatically in such a short period of time that I don't know that the political engine has kept up completely with it, you know?
Right.
And but we as voters need to transition from being low informed voters, right, to high informed voters and soak up that information and be intentional and do what you're doing, right, which is listening and interpreting that for ourselves. Now, what I said at the top of this was one of my first impressions, it was far less entertaining, right? And I'm just being
Mhm.
honest in my assessment about that. But I also know it's not supposed to be entertainment, right? It's supposed to be informational, but I'm being trained to want to be
Entertained.
entertained
Yeah.
in some way. And so I think that's indicative of a problem, right? Because technically, I was not entertained from the beginning and wanted to change the channel. But I was like, no, again, this is not entertainment. Okay, I need to listen. I need to know what's going on. I need to understand how I'm viewing this, but also how other people may view this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying to be more informed despite my desire for something else.
I'm thinking as you were speaking about it being entertainment or infotainment, right? Where we have that blend. I'm thinking of TikTok
Mm,
because TikTok initially was what 30, 60 seconds, maybe 90 seconds at most. Incredibly, short form content where people were sharing stories, how to's, right? There's tons of information that you can get on this platform. And similar with other social media platforms, Instagram in response has Instagram Reels. And I've seen the length
hmm
increase, right? So now you can make a 10-minute TikTok where you can get a little bit more in depth about whatever your topic is. And that's really fascinating to me because I'm assuming they did this in response to customer or consumer demand, which would be, I need more time to talk about this.
hmm
And so then that makes me wonder, is critical thinking back? Is substance back?
in short form.
Short form substance, is it back?
Maybe it's back. Maybe TikTok was training us all along, right? Like you said, 30, 60, 90, now, 10 minutes. Like
10 minutes?
maybe. And, I'm sure, like, we've seen all different sorts of political, not ads, but content, right? That takes up all of those spaces. And I'm just wondering, like, if we need more of those longer form pieces to help inform the voting public. As a marketer, my whole thing is rinse, reuse, repeat, right? And so we create something, obviously we chop it up, we rinse, reuse, repeat it in different ways, and understanding that people want to digest information differently. I'm more of a visual person, visual and audio. So visual audio person. If I just hear something, I might not retain it as well as having the visual component
Okay.
with it. Um, so like audiobooks, although I like audiobooks, probably not the best if it's something that I really need to remember and digest. And so you take into account all these different forms. And so maybe there just needs to be more effort towards the really policy driven pieces from these candidates. I know a lot of third parties do it, right? They have their own interpretation, which is cool, but I really want to hear that from the candidates in their authentic voice, in the way
Yeah.
that they're going to talk about it. And what, again, on the debate stage, it's really the high level, for lack of a better term right now, dumbing down of really dense policy that nobody wants to hear about on stage, right, on television, which is a problem that nobody wants to hear about it. Because then they're one issue voters. And that's an issue because it's just the one thing that they can actually zero in on that may be important to them, but there's a host of things that are affecting it, and we don't truly understand that effect. I know there's a lot of things I learn every single time, right? Like, this was not necessarily taught in depth in school, and basically how much our votes matter and how we need to think, and like you said, think critically about the
Right.
information that we're given and how do we digest that information. I know these bills are like billions of pages long.
Mhm.
I don't know how to solve for that, right? But it needs to be solved for. Because what we've also seen is that politicians that we elect that are there to serve us sometimes have dual focus, and that other focus is more on them and what they want to achieve as part of their legacy, in their role. And
Mhm.
we need to be aware of that. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. Everybody has their own agenda. No one does what they're doing 100% for the good of someone else,
Right.
right? Let's just keep that real. So, what is in it for them is what we need to understand when we put people in office as well, and what are they going to do with that power.
So, marketing question for you. You said, the marketing formula is rinse, reuse, repeat.
My marketing formula.
Yours. Well, you're an incredible marketer, so we can have it as a standard. Um, how often can you do that? How do you know when there's a limit to having?
Engagement. You know, you really. So the reason why it's rinse, reuse, repeat is because nobody sees everything at one time, right? We're our focus is all over the place. Plus, you also have to see things several times in order for it to even register.
Mhm.
So you have to constantly put things out there. And then, as I said, in different ways for people to digest it differently. You can use something like if it's really good and high value and meaningful, you can use it for as long as it is that to the particular audience, right? Um, so it really makes sense to create quality, in some ways matched with quantity, but more so quality that you can do a lot of different things with. So I don't know that there's like a total end game. I mean, at some point, the stuff is old and stale and new information comes out. And I think that happens a lot more today because there's so much that's coming
Mhm.
out that
Mhm.
it probably has a less of a shelf life than it probably did 5 years ago. But you
Sure.
can get some good traction from quality.
Okay. Yeah, I was just thinking about the number of ways that we need to hear information for it to stick. I'm also thinking of civics class, which has been eliminated from a majority of curriculums among the United States. So, even just, I think in the average adult's understanding of civics and how things work. I heard a lot during the debate of, what people could and could not do during the time as vice president and, what those responsibilities are like. And simple things. So I remember Schoolhouse Rock. I don't know
Hmm.
if anybody listening does, but
By the way, they did one for Project 2025.
they did. They did. Oh, it's great. It
Yeah.
is great. Um, a great explanation of what you can expect.
Hmm.
Maybe we should do that in the show
Show
notes, but
notes. Let me write that down.
yeah, but very simple things, right? The three branches of government, the number of senators, the number of representatives in the House of Representatives, right? These are things that we should have some sort of working knowledge of. The fact that you're not just voting for the president on election day, right? You have everyone from your local school board representatives to the president of the United States, and it's critical that you have a working understanding. I would think so. I've just been thinking of ways to make that entertaining too.
Well, um, I don't know the answer to that. At the end of the day, I have no idea what the answer to that is. But if we did more things like Schoolhouse Rock, I think that's step number one. But I think it definitely is a shame that, like you said, civics class is gone because I think Well, the question, I don't know what I think on this, but the question is why? Why have those classes been removed? Is it intentional,
Mhm.
right? Is it better for us in general not to know what people are doing and what the responsibilities are, because then someone will be held accountable for their actions or inactions, right? And I can't help but ask that question because there have been so many different things that have happened intentionally, such as, uh, trying to rewrite the rewrite the districting, right? So we control voting blocks. Like that's an example of just like things that are intentionally done to control the outcomes of elections. And if you start in schools by starting off with us being, again, low informed voters, right? Then the barrier becomes higher and higher, in terms of us getting to the point where we understand what's going on. Because then life happens, work happens, we're influenced by all the people around us, and we don't feel like we need to dive deeper and learn for ourselves because everything's just being given to us in this fast and furious way. So I can't help but ask the question, is that intentional? Because why in the world would we not think that that content is not important
Right.
for students to learn when they're going to cast their first vote at 18 when they graduate high school?
And I guess even the fact that it's a point to be celebrated, right? I remember casting my first vote when I was 18 and I was really, really excited about it.
Yeah.
Um, are we still looking to engage young people?
Depends on which side of the aisle you talk to, right? Because
Which is so troubling, right? Because
yeah, you think that a particular, young people typically are for forward progress, and they typically seem to vote Democratic, and so definitely want change, right? They want these things, and so they look to the party that's going to bring that in the way that they think is important.
Mhm.
And yeah, if you might want to suppress that vote if you for certain groups, right? Like we've seen those things done intentionally time and time again. So I don't think it's a huge leap to think that there's a broader plan there. It might sound a little conspiracy theorist, but I don't think so. But at the end of the day, I really don't think so. There's tons of evidence around this. And
And even if
so,
we were to say, um, we don't want the kids voting because they don't understand the implications of their vote. We don't want the kids voting because they may not know what they're voting for. My response would then be, well, shouldn't we share with them, right? Shouldn't we give them the information necessary to make an informed, educated
I
vote?
mean, yeah,
With
and they're no
that
longer
education.
kids. They're adults at 18, just adults who can't drink, but they're adults, right? They can go out, get jobs, rent apartments, they can buy a car, they can do all the things. And so there shouldn't be an argument that they're uninformed, right? They should have been prepared for that. And they've graduated, many of whom are going off to college, and they're perfectly capable of learning, whether you went to college or not. But you're perfectly capable of absorbing information that's going to have a major effect on your own life.
Yeah.
And they're given the right to vote at 18. So that's just it. So either you prepare them or you don't. And what's your reason for not doing it?
Hmm.
I can't think of a good reason for not doing it
I
other than a
mean,
sinister one.
yes. Others tend to be, you know, if you missed us at the Inbound conference, I mean, it was a time, but
If it
at
was.
least you get us here. But one of the points that we came out with, which is, what's the point of the exclusion? And I think to your point, it's very, very clear to see what the point of the exclusion is. Is it, I don't know that we would say it's a legitimate purpose, legitimate civic purpose at this point, outside of just looking to control
Yeah.
his
I mean,
information.
it's also the same is unrelated, but like financial literacy should be a required course in high school. You should know how to manage your money as an adult when you leave school. Why is that not part of the curriculum? Because that's going to help students, hopefully, not students, excuse me, that's going to help 18-year-old plus adults, okay, understand how to manage their money, stay out of debt, save, hopefully reduce some of that, economic gap. Like it's going to have so many benefits understanding the stock markets, right? Just how things work. If I had that class when I was much younger,
Yeah.
I mean, one of the first things that I did was open up a credit card in college and run that sucker up because I didn't understand you had to pay it back. Okay. And then what happened? I got bad credit, right? And didn't understand that I was going to need that for a while and then had to work to repair all of that, right? And so, but if I had known that, I'm not saying maybe I still would have done it. Maybe I still wouldn't have done it. But
It was an informed consent,
yeah, I was ignorant about it in that regard. And maybe I would have had the information. Or I'm sure my parents told me, but I don't, listen to your parents, right? So you need to hear it from different sources. I'm sure my mother was like, you got to pay that back, right? And I'm like, what? I have no idea. But again, my question is, why aren't we teaching these important skills, life skills, okay, that are necessary in high school? What is the intention behind that?
To those who you don't have to be a parent to teach, right? There are mentors. You can, I'm sure maybe you have nieces, nephews, your friends' children. There's so many opportunities for you to meaningfully engage with
Yeah.
young people who really do need that perspective from people outside of their parents. Like you said, Karen, no one's going to listen to their parents. You don't know, right? You need an unbiased adult who may be cooler than your parents.
There you go.
That's what.
There you go. But I think at the end of the day, no matter what our age is, right, we need to understand that our presence on this earth has meaning in many different ways. And one of those ways is in the voting booth, because we live in this system that was created before many of us were born, right? Before any of us were born, probably.
I was
And
going
it's
to say,
different.
hopefully all of us, if you're still living from yeah, another issue on our hands.
And maybe there needs to be some tweaks to some of these systems. I don't know. But we're living in this system and we need to understand the game, right? Know the rules
Yep.
and play it accordingly, right? Play it according to the rules, or know when we need to like work to change some of them. And there's a ton of loopholes, which means there's a lot of rules bending. So understand what those opportunities to bend the rules are, good and bad, and when you need to help put the kibosh on some of those things. We all need to be active participants in this process and not just stand by and complain about it. But it's hard to be active if you don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
And learn how to speak and write well.
Exactly. Exactly. If facts sound even better when they are well articulated.
Exactly. Because guess what? You can lie and people will believe you. Right? Speak and write well with confidence too. Right. But it's even better when you're telling the truth.
Even better when you're telling the truth.
Yeah. So anyway. So that's my takeaways from the VP debate.
Likewise, likewise. I mean, hopefully, we would love to hear from you, hear what you thought, anything that you took away. Um, I guess we'll see.
Yeah,
You know,
we only
we'll
have
continue.
the election. A lot more.
Totally, totally depends on, yeah, wherever you're getting the source of the poll from. So I don't know how that is, but you know,
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens. There's a lot. Whatever happens, we're gonna have a lot to talk about.
we will. We will.
All right, until the next time on the E word.